So welcome everyone to today's webinar. So it's all about how do you help develop your people's career in a virtual world. So I'm Emma Rowe, I'm head of our Learning for All, and I'm joined today by Amy Walters, who's our head of research. Amy, do you want to just say a little hello to people that are listening?
Yeah, so hi everyone, my name's Amy, and as Emma says, I'm head of research at Lane4. I'm particularly interested in this topic of career development because we did some research into it a few years back in terms of what factors objectively and subjectively predict career success. And there's some really interesting nuggets around what makes a great career developer that hopefully we can share a few of those today. It's a very short time frame to talk about such a big topic as career development, but it's one that I'm really interested in and think we've got expertise to add.
And that's what we'll be doing. It'll be a real mix of what some of the, the hard facts, the data, the research telling us, and also what are some of our subjective opinions, what some of our experiencing, what are we noticing in organisations, in managers and as individuals trying to develop our own careers. So we did think we'd start off with these shiny photos and then thought it's completely unrepresentative of what's going on in our life right now. Thought we'd have a bit more of a human touch with you all. So this is it. This is our setups. Amy's looking far more proficient her setup, with a nice laptop stand than I am. So we've got 30 minutes. We're hoping for a quick Q&A at the end. So please do engage with us in the chat box. It's great to have a few of you saying hi, and let Rob saying there that homeschooling is going well. So I'm sure people are interested in some top tips there, Rob, because I'm hearing a mix of different experiences from people. So we'd love to know what's drawn you to today's webinar, and please, get in touch throughout. So we did think we'd start with, this question of what's on people's minds. Why are people asking about career development in a virtual world? So I'll probably throw to you, Amy, to kind of tackle this one head on.
Yeah, I just think career development is such a pertinent topic for people right now, especially because we're still operating in this predominantly virtual world. It's raising a lot of questions for people, sort of like how do I make sure my work's still visible? How do I keep networking with people effectively? If maybe they've just joined an organization and it's like, how do I make a good impression when I'm not really bumping into people or introducing myself as I naturally would be able to? And then there's just the overarching sort of idea of like, am I out of sight, out of mind, and going to miss out on some key opportunities that you normally get in a sort of more normal context? And I think, as we've alluded to here, parents particularly are really caught in the crossfire at the moment, managing childcare and their career, and some people having to make some quite drastic career choices. I read in a report yesterday that 1 in 4 women are considering downshifting their careers or leaving the workforce due to the impact of COVID. So I think career-wise, there's just so much going on for people, and organisations really need to be leaning in to that and supporting their people. You can't leave it as out of sight, out of mind. You've got to be sort of leaning into that conversation rather than putting it on hold for later. I think it's just really timely.
I think it's that, for me, Amy, it's that question of out of sight, out of mind. Is this a real thing? And I know, people seem to be talking about it a lot more now that we've gone virtual. But I know, kind of particularly as a one-to-one coach, that this isn't something that has never been there before. People returning from maternity leave, people that have been on long-term sickness, remote workers that have been remote workers but have been the minority of their business, have been asking some of these questions. And it's only now that it seems to be the majority that are in this situation that this is really starting to become a talking point amongst some of our clients and people that we work with. So brilliant. I think that's kind of setting the scene of why have we picked to do a webinar on this today. In terms of what we're going to cover, actually starting with some of the context, Amy's just begun there, but let's look at some of the facts about career development. How has and hasn't it changed? And then we'll start to explore why it is that people may choose to work virtually. Right now, there might not be that choice, but we're going to get to a situation, an increase in flexible working policies, that why might people choose to work virtually? Why might they have a hybrid way of working, sometimes face-to-face? And what might that mean for their chances of career progression? And then finally, we're going to really end with some practical tips. And we're hoping that these are things that you can share with your managers on how they can really support the career development of those that they lead. So let's get right into it. Why is developing your people's career important? Now, I'm imagining if you've joined this webinar, it's a no-brainer, and you're unlikely to have joined it otherwise unless you already have an answer to that question. But you may well be surrounded by managers or people in your organisation that don't necessarily have that at the forefront of their mind. So, Amy, I'm going to throw it straight over to you, but why is it important that managers are involved in developing people's careers?
Yeah, and I think it's a really, sometimes it seems like obvious, but when you actually get down to it, like offering career development training and sort of support, really backing people on their career development, it's common to like encounter a bit of nervousness from business leaders and managers on this topic of career development, because sort of people do want to keep hold of their best people, and managers don't want to necessarily risk losing them or then progressing and doing other things, but then you lose your best people. But I think it does come down to talent development and talent retention. So by investing in career development, by building a workforce of great career developers, while it may seem like a risk to take, especially with this perception of job hopping being more prevalent, which actually that's a myth. It's not more prevalent. In fact, average tenure at organizations since 1983 has only shifted 1 year. It was like average tenure was 5 years in 1983, and now it's 4 years. And millennials just don't move around more than previous generations. It's just that young people tend to move around more in their early stages of their career. So I think that myth probably doesn't help create that fear that, oh, people are moving around all the time and I don't want to help people move around. But for me, if you're not investing in people, if you're not helping them to grow or develop professionally, that's the biggest risk. Because your best talent will just inherently grow hungry to develop their careers. So you may as well help people try and be the best they can be rather than try and clip their wings on this.
I found that really interesting when you told me it yesterday when we were kind of doing the run through about that idea that the myth of job hopping, because I'm thinking, well, actually, how much of that is now from what I've read and perception? And when you actually look at the data and the facts and the research, I found it phenomenal that actually it really hasn't changed in all of those years. So just to be really clear, like identifying a manager's role and their responsibility in supporting the development of people, it's not, they have a responsibility to help them, but that's not taking the responsibility away from an individual. At the end of the day, no one is more invested in your career than you are. So there is definitely that accountability on an individual to develop their own careers and find their own way to do it. But not everyone is confident and has the capabilities or the skills to do that. And that's where the manager really comes in. And what we're going to focus on today is how can you support those managers to drive and open up the opportunities for people to develop their careers.
And I think there's definitely like like you say, Emma, it's like an ownership that individuals need to take. Organizations need to be very upfront about that ownership that they're expecting people to take in their careers. But still, managers play a key role in how much you develop people, how much you champion them. So it's a really good one to flag.
Brilliant. So we're looking at, career development, but I think taking just a step back is thinking about what do we even mean by career anymore, and how, if at all, has that changed? So what we found when we were doing a lot of work on prepping for this webinar is actually the most significant change is how people now view career. So if you think about traditionally, there's the upward, do your years of service model of career development. That 3 stages, I go through my education, I then work, and then I retire. Now, what we're noticing is the careers are now much less rigid and linear than that. People are following different paths. So in the past, when it was you'd sit back, you'd be able to sit back from any major career decisions because time would do it. You'd do your length of service, and then you suddenly once you've worked for 8 years, you can then get the next promotion and so on. And you could progress really steadily in your role with skills that you originally qualified in, and gradually increase your status in that way. And today that's a strategy that's unlikely for a lot of organizations, and a lot of areas of business is unlikely to bring the same successes. And some of the things for this are that the career paths, they're no longer that linear, predictable way. And the reason for it, companies, you just have to look at the last year, don't you? Companies need to be far more adaptable than ever before, and to have very adaptable organizations, that won't work or be successful unless you have very adaptable people, particularly if you're looking to attract and retain and grow talent from within. So it's less now about exchanging that long-term that kind of long-term loyalty for career progression, and more about, right, what are the skills that I need to learn and acquire to be able to stay relevant and stay ahead. And Amy, I know you were then digging into some of the research on why that might be that the career ladder's changed.
Yeah, for sure. Like in our research team, we're always tracking like the megatrends, what's going on, what the bigger factors that are driving this shift. And I think just to build on your point, it's been mentioned that that importance of adaptability is so key, just to highlight again, because I think that it has been commented that we're moving towards this generalist work environment where each person's capable of doing multiple jobs or transferring their skills. I heard just this morning that actually some of the airline, because the cabin crew are trained in first aid, they've used some of the cabin crew to help deliver some of the vaccines. And it's just another example of how flexible people are being with their skills to match the context. And this constant learning and constant adapting is just essential in such a fluid work environment. So I think the pandemic has definitely launched like a disruptive grenade into people's careers, which we'll pick up in a minute. But there are bigger things occurring that are making this shift happen in terms of adaptability. The biggest one being automation. So we're starting to see artificial intelligence and that robot revolution play out. Lots of tasks and jobs that can be automated are being automated across a whole range of sectors like law, accountancy, medicine, some in finance. There's a whole range of jobs, not work, but jobs and tasks that are being done by artificial intelligence and robots now. And in fact, I think the World Economic Forum forecasts that the robot revolution would create 97 million jobs worldwide, but destroy almost as many. So it just shows how flexible people have to be. And in the UK, I think another report said that 90% of UK workers will have to engage in some type of reskilling by 2030. So this need to upskill as roles evolve and fundamental job changes occur is just ongoing. It's not going to go away with the pandemic. And then so that's like the big one that I think is coming in at the moment, but there's other smaller shifts like the aging workforce. People are living longer, working longer, and unretirement becoming a thing. So people who have retired or are close to retirement are opting to continue to be part of the workforce to get that sense of meaning and sort of connection as well to the people that you work with, and they don't want to let go of that. And then there's the changing workforce expectations. So work is less and less becoming about the status and the name or the brand that you work for, and increasingly about finding meaning and purpose in what you do beyond financial success. So that purpose driven is often attributed to millennials, but I'm always skeptical. I think every generation kind of wants meaning and purpose in their work. It's a fundamental human need, but it's just really amplifying right now.
And I think that comes in when you said unretirement phenomenon, just generally filled me with a little bit of dread. And I thought, oh my God, what's this idea of never going into retirement?
No, it is a choice. People having
the choice because they want that feeling of meaning. I think exactly then supports your point of that isn't just a millennial thing, the Gen Z thing that's coming up. Actually, everyone in life, meaning is such, and purpose is such an important aspect of, well-being and fulfillment. So come on then, COVID-19, because we couldn't get through a webinar these days without talking about it. What impact has that had?
I think it's really prevalent as well to talk about it, especially with this virtual working being the temporary norm that we're all working in. But I think it's worth shouting that this hybrid working is what's on the horizon. So that's a workforce that's split between working remotely and working in the office. And hinges on basically people having more choice and autonomy about where they feel is best to work for that day. But it's so much harder to do and so much harder to manage, like career-wise, because at the moment it's relatively easy for most companies because the whole workforce has been leveled. Everyone's working remotely, so everyone's in the same boat. But I think as soon as that hybrid working starts to come in, it's going to be a lot harder to get right in terms of people's careers, opportunities, support. Is there again that perception of a disadvantage if you're not in as much? And yet people are really keen for remote working to come in. I think one survey shows 65% of their respondents wanted to work full-time remote post-pandemic. 31% wanted that hybrid working environment. So that's 96% of people who want some form of remote work. And employees are going to have to work out how to make that sort of get people back into work in the right way with that autonomy and choice. And the other one that's just coming or worth mentioning is just that COVID-19 has forced so many people to experience a career shock. So that's when a disruptive or extraordinary event comes in with factors outside your control, and it triggers a deliberate thought process concerning your career. And so many people have had such different experiences, like being furloughed, really being pushed to the limits of their capacity. Some have had the type of work that they do altered. Some have had family life altered so much. It's really careers and your job and what you want out of work, I think, is at the forefront of people's minds, and managers need to be equipped to deal with those conversations and again, lean into them and support, rather than just think, oh, it's a bit of an elephant in the room, but we'll just plow on with the day-to-day and deal with what's immediate.
I particularly the one around there that jumps out at me, the idea about how, you know, people facing furlough or people that have faced redundancy. I know we were talking the latter end of last year about, well, what about when organisations go through that, and then you have that idea of survivor syndrome, the people that have survived, the companies that then say, okay, you're still here, and that idea of them being stretched to their limits and capacity with an uncertain future. How do you still lean into the conversations about career development and career progression? And we wanted, before we go on to actually looking at virtual working and the impact it does have on career progression, you'll see a poll pop up in front of you here, and actually we're interested in your thoughts. So as we just talk through this next section, what are your perceptions? So please click in there. Do you think that virtual working helps or harms career progression, or are you not sure? So it's just on perception. If you add your answers in there, and we'll explore actually, what do we think? What does the research and some of the data tell us? Anything that you'd add on kind of the idea of people being worried about the out of sight, out of mind from what you've been noticing, Amy?
Yeah, there is stuff. Sorry, I was like waiting for the responses to come in eagerly. Yeah, I think people are just sort of generally, worried that they will be out of sight, out of mind, and their employer won't be aware of the work they do. They won't be seen or heard from senior managers. They won't have the right support to progress their career. I think there's a lot of fear out there at the moment that it does negatively impact, but it'll be interesting to see what other people think.
So I'm just having a look there. Do you know what that's? How interesting is that? I thought that would be far less split. So we've got there 32% actually think that virtual working helps career progression. We'd love to know in the chat box, we'd love to know some of your thoughts on where do you think it helps it. We've got 25% saying it harms it, and I would probably be on the fence with a number of you there on saying I genuinely don't know. I know personally, when we first talked about this this webinar, my perception was actually it does. The idea of out of sight, out of mind does harm career progression. But Amy, I'm interested in what you found from some of the research in terms of, does it actually harm career progression?
Yeah, I'm really interested in that split and how many people just aren't sure, a bit on the fence, and maybe this year's slightly changed it and people have become a bit more savvy about how to not make it have as much of an impact. In terms of the answer from research or from evidence, there's very little evidence and studies actually on this topic, which is surprising given how prevalent remote working and that question's been for people for years. But basically the answer, based on one published study, is that it kind of depends. But in general, it seems like the remote workers receive an equal number of promotions. So they progress through the ranks of their organization at the same speed, but they don't necessarily earn the same bump in pay. So the extent to which remote working harms career progression basically depends on a number of factors. One of them is how prevalent is remote working in your workplace. Are you working in a remote friendly organization or a remote first organization? So they are two slightly different things. then you've got the amount of remote working that you do is also key, and also how much regular FaceTime you have with your manager. So that's another really crucial factor that seems to play in to the extent to which it will harm career progression. But the evidence is not really there. So it's based on one published study. So it's a great area for someone to do research. If they want to contact us, we'd be really keen on that, because I think it needs more evidence to give that judgment.
There's some great stuff actually from people encouraging about what they think it helps in terms of international opportunities, maybe leveling the playing field. Some people saying they want a hybrid system, which is where we are expecting the world to go. And one from Claire, actually, that will link onto what you're going on to speak about here, Amy. Claire was saying about really finding it helping work well-being, more of that kind of work-life balance. And as we were starting, I was saying to Amy, I did my morning commute this morning, which was walk out the door, go and get a coffee and have a walk around Victoria Park, which would usually have been spent an hour in the car. So I can see some definite benefits. But I wonder if you quickly just want to touch on some of the advantages and disadvantages here.
Yeah, again, like some of the ones we sort of all quite familiar with by this stage in the pandemic, I think. By advantages can be like a positive impact on well-being. That's been shown by quite a number of studies, but it is worth flagging that that's conditional. So it depends on the space that you have working from home, and also your ability to separate work and home life. So you're a separator or an integrator. Separators seem to do a bit better. Also, it can lead to increased productivity. I think there's quite a lot of studies on that over the past year. But again, it's conditional. We're not sure that its productivity per hour may be declining. So don't know whether productivity is increasing or people are just spending more hours because they can. So that commute time is being used to work. But in theory, you also have the advantage of that time saved commuting, so you can learn a new skill or work on an extra sort of project, which might benefit your career. So I think there's loads of things that can be really good for your career, and it can boost that work-life balance, enabling you to get out and do different exercise or find that balance, which can be so important for making good career decisions. If you've got better well-being, better sleep, better work-life balance, it can really help you make good career decisions. In terms of the disadvantages, I'm very aware of time and I want to get onto the tips. Tendency to focus on tasks and not enough on relationships, less serendipitous encounters, and also the creative performance is significantly lower, which is linked to reduced collaboration. So again, my main message here would just be aware of these benefits. There's benefits to virtual working career-wise that can help you do better quality work. But know when it might be useful to go in. Maybe it's that creative meeting, maybe a decision's being made. There's certain moments that's probably kind of shrewd to make the right choice there.
And I'm noticing these are very an individual level, but you've also, some people have talked here about people that aren't as geographically mobile. The virtual working provides a much greater pool of talent recruitment as well, and talent attraction for organisations that are maybe more remote or need broader range of specialism. So that's something else. There's so many organisational advantages and disadvantages, which is why there's an increase in flexible working policies that are going on right now. So we talked about a little bit around kind of organisations and individuals having their own responsibility to develop their career. So before we go on to what managers can do, we thought it'd be useful to kind of touch on, well, what do individuals need to be great career developers? What can you listening do to think about actually how do you go about really proactively looking after your own career? So Ames, I know these are mainly your points here, aren't they?
I can just rattle through a bit, but we do have an article that details a few of these in more detail, which we can send out to our participants. But these are basically all the things you need to do to be a great career developer. You need to have that strong self-knowledge of your strengths and weaknesses, set realistic goals, but hold them loosely so that you're open and can capitalize on unexpected events, build and utilize networks, manage your personal brand, job craft, make good career decisions, which again hinges on your well-being. Are you in the right frame of mind to see something as an opportunity rather than a threat? And maintaining that good work-life balance. I think just in the virtual world context, the two I'd pick out is the strong self-knowledge in terms of where managers they play a role in this. So in the virtual environment, it can have this always on feel, and providing someone with the feedback that they need to sort of get to know their strengths and weaknesses might not always be top of our mind as we're pulled from meeting to meeting, but it's just so important that managers keep giving people that feedback and keep helping them make that assessment of how they're doing in their job and where could be better, where they could go with their career. And the second one is just building the networks, which historically in career development, you kind of want to use the strong ties that you have for getting strategic information and getting career sponsorship and mentors, and your weak ties for accessing resources. That's typically how it plays out. But a lot of research over the past year has called out on people to make use of your dormant ties. So the relationships that you had with people who you were once really close to, maybe when you bumped into them in the office more, but you haven't been in contact with them for a while, it's these people that you should be getting in touch with, and sort of using them for information and advice and how to deal with specific challenges that you're facing. So there's 2 tips really, I guess, for what managers can be encouraging people to do is by helping people, encourage them to give feedback and encourage their people to use their dormant ties.
Brilliant. So we'll go on to now what are some of the top tips that managers can do. While I'm doing that, Amy, there's a question in there from Lisa in the chat box about what does the research say a good career decision is. So we'll come to that in the Q&A after this bit. So just ending today on, what are 5 practical tips that managers can do today? So either you can encourage your managers to do, or that you yourself can do as a manager. So first bit there is about increasing the visibility of successes. So managers, what they've got the great opportunity to do is provide broader visibility and recognition. But in order to do that, they need to be aware of what are the projects that people own, what are they participating in. So things like when key milestones are met, share the overall team achievement, but really fundamentally, it's about highlighting people's personal contributions of when they were part of it. So recognizing what the research team at Lane 4 has done brilliantly, but I would also then encourage in that email, in however I was recognizing that on our social forums, to say, actually, and Amy, this was something that you really put into this that created a great outcome as well. So that would be our first bit of advice. The second one is provide opportunities to step up. So how many of you think, I can't attend a meeting, so I will send my thoughts in advance or send my apologies? Actually taking a second to stop and think, could someone in the team go instead of me? Could you ask them to represent you? Ultimately, what you need to do is make sure you've ensure you've provided them with the right context, taken the time to answer questions they have to help give them that confidence. But it's a great way to give them greater exposure to different stakeholders, and also to help them look at what does stepping up look like in our department, what are some of these needs and these areas of the business, some things that they're focused on. The next one that we've got is about actually creating best practice forums. There's a double win here, benefits for everyone. So think about when that project was successfully finished, where is there the forum where people can share how they accomplished the outcome, hurdles they had to overcome, creative ways they tackled challenges, by, as a manager, helping to elicit and find this forum, because it provides a great platform for recognition for those people that were involved, but it also creates large steps in developing that learning culture where organisations learn and adapt quickly from each other rather than every time recreating the wheel. So the next, I've got to put them up, you've got the sneak preview, but the next on there about help foster relationships with their second line manager. So it's good to get to know people's manager's manager, encourage them to hold round tables or virtual town halls, so they can really be visible. Your senior leaders can be visible, they can get to know the extended team, but you as a manager, really encouraging your team to actively participate, take those opportunities to ask questions. And then the final one, where is this relationship going conversation? Most people are used to having the here and now development ones. What could I be doing better in my role? How can I maximize the use of super strengths? Where are your skill gaps? But not all employees have the confidence to sit down with their manager and say, where's this relationship going? And what I mean by that is, what are the future options and the paths within the company? Is really fundamental for managers to help people understand what's the key role that they're going to play in the future, kind of deep and meaningful conversations around action plans with measurable goals, and goes a long way for keeping talent around for longer. So they're kind of the top tips. We're going to send them out afterwards. I'm conscious that it's past, so thank you so much for everyone that joined.